Hey y'all, this is Nancy, the Handy Scandy, and welcome back to my Crafty Ventures. Today we are going to talk about how to make this card, and we're going to talk about what to do when a good card goes bad. And this one pretty much went bad from the start. So I began with the Picket Fence Studio Barberton Daisy, and here I'm measuring it just so I make sure I cut the right size piece of paper. And here I pull out my Tim Holtz Tonic guillotine trimmer, and I'm using some Arteza watercolor paper, so I trim it down to 6 by 6, and I just wanted to make sure that I had enough room on that piece of paper for my entire image. So here I pull out my Misty and I put the paper in that because it's a big image. I've never used it before. I've never used my Misty for anything this big either, and of course I'm using watercolor paper, so I know I'm going to have to hit it a couple times. So I use the Misty and I use the, what is it called? Versamark ink, because it's nice and sticky and it's going to work well for my embossing powder. So I hit it with the Versamark, and then I tip it in the light to make sure that I've got, ink everywhere on the image. And it takes me 3 or 4 times actually to get it. And I'm using a baby wipe to run across the top of the Misty door. And that way it gives me the ability to slide it across the top of the door without my hand getting stuck on the plastic, and I can apply proper pressure. So I do this with the Versamark and applying the pressure 3, 4, maybe even 5 times. I'm not even sure. And then I pull out my Ink on 3 Black as Night Ultra Fine Embossing Powder. And what you guys can't see is that to the side of my desk I have a little fan going, and it is blowing this embossing powder everywhere. What you can see though is that I missed a couple spots. I'm trying to put the embossing powder on it thinking I just missed the powder, but no, unfortunately there's no ink there. So I'm working on that. I put the embossing powder on, I heat it, I use my heat tool after I use my little brush to wipe off the excess because I'm being all nice and neat and trying to get it done properly. And it takes me, I think, 3 times of putting the embossing powder on the Versamark and then the embossing powder and heating it up. Versamark embossing powder heat gun. So it takes me 3 or 4 times of doing that before I get the whole image. On the final time, I actually get the spots where I'm missing, but I get way too much of the embossing powder. So it's real thick, it's real bulky, and it ends up getting all over my paper. So I've got spots, I've got blotches, I've got super thick embossing powder, but I think, okay, it's not the end of the world. I can work with this. So the ink blow or the powder blowing around and all the different times it took me to get a proper image, I'm on the struggle bus for sure. And I'm cleaning up because there's embossing powder everywhere. So you can see that I'm using a baby wipe to clean everything up, and I kind of feel like Barney, singing the cleanup song. There's embossing powder in the paper, there's embossing powder in the hinges, along the edges, all over the mat. And finally I decide, okay, it's clean enough. I can start this painting process. So I pull out the paints, and they are the Arteza gouache colors. There's 60, and I'll try to link it below. I tried to show you all the different colors, but that didn't work. So I'll list them down below. But suffice it to say that I have a lot of the warm yellows and some deep reds and some shades of green. So I pull them out. I pull out some water brushes, but I don't like the water in the actual brush. I prefer using a cup because it gets just a little too juicy for me. So I start painting. I go at it with the greens first, and the stem and the leaves, and I don't know what's that little cup piece called that holds the actual flower. I don't know what that's called. If you know what that is, let me know. And I go at it with this gouache, and again, it's new to me, so I hadn't used it before, and to me it's like a mix between watercolor and acrylic. It has the opacity of an acrylic and kind of the texture of an acrylic, but the overall effect is very watercolor. So again, I'm learning. I'm a work in progress. This is a work in progress. Clearly, I've been on the struggle bus the entire time. Since I put that stamp in the Misty, I've been struggling. But I'm going at it and I'm liking the painting process. I'm right now in my particular process, I'm learning more about shadows and depth and that type of thing versus highlights. And you'll see when I switch over to the top part, the head of the flower where the petals are, that it's a little flat. So I have a lot of color, but it's a little flat. The highlights just aren't there. And it's okay. It is what it is. It's a beautiful image. It's a beautiful stamp. The artist has done all the work. So if you just follow what the artist has done, you can lay down any kind of color anyway, and it's going to look gorgeous because it's a gorgeous image. And of course, Picket Fence has amazing products. So all of that hard work is already done. And you just have to be kind to yourself and show yourself grace as you learn to paint in the way that you want to paint, whatever that looks like for you and whatever that looks like for me. So showing myself grace as I learn. And I'm just putting some of the darker colors. I've got some Bordeaux Red and some burnt Sienna that I'm putting down in the nooks and the crannies and where the petals overlay each other, where there would be shadows. And I'm just trying to create some depth and dimension and not worrying so much about the highlights. I'll learn highlights at another time. So I'm getting down to the end of what at least what I feel is the end. And I decide that I'm going to embrace all the black embossing powder and I'm going to go with some spatter. So I water down my colors. And I take my water brush and I just start spattering. I use the gold, I use the yellows, I use the yellow ochre, which is kind of an orange, and I use a mid yellow, which is kind of an orange. And I use both of the reds and the white and the greens. And I want all the colors that I use for spatter to marry the colors that I've used in the image. So it keeps that continuity. And I didn't think I was going to do spatter on this whole thing, but I'm happy with the spatter overall. So, yeah, there's all my spatter process. And then I decide, because of the opacity of the paint, that I want to put it back in the Misty and try to darken up those black lines. So I put it in the Misty. This is where I hit it with the VersaFine, and it takes me a couple times to get it the way I want it. It does kind of enhance the lines, so I like it. So I hit it a couple times to make sure that I get all the nooks and crannies and the spots, because as you saw, I had so much trouble in the beginning making sure I hit all the right spots. So I do that, and then I pull it out of the Misty, and then again, of course, it's cleanup time. And on that last run with the VersaFine, I don't know how well you can see it, but this is where it takes another bad turn. And I get a little bit frustrated because I double stamp. Yeah, so I go through all of that and somehow the paper shifts and I double stamp and there's an outline image of the whole flower. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, what I'm going to do is pull out my beautiful double blossom stencil from A Colorful Life Designs, and I'm going to try to go very light around the image just to kind of highlight it. But there's ink everywhere. I'm getting black ink everywhere and I don't know where it's coming from. So yeah, it is a comedy of errors. So I'm cleaning up the ink, trying to figure out where it's coming from. I don't know where it's coming from. I stop and I clean. It's on my hands. It's on the stencil. It's crazy. So I do the reveal. I'm happy with it. I feel like it's covered up most of the smudges. I don't know. What do you think? Then I trim it down and I'm still getting ink everywhere. And then I realize, oh my gosh, it's the ink on the image. That's where it's coming from. I thought I had, had it on my desk or on my tools or something, and I cleaned all of them up, only to find it was the image. So I hit it with my heat gun, thinking that was going to dry it enough, but it did not. So I line the image itself, the trimmed down image, with some fun foam, only to have more ink everywhere. So I'm really frustrated with the whole ink process. It's everywhere. And I use some of the score tape to adhere the fun foam, and still trying to clean up the ink as I go. And I can't cut a straight line. I think I told you all that. So when I get the fun foam onto the back of the image and I put the image down on the card base, it's not straight. So I have to wiggle and jiggle and try to get it in place. And I put it up under my mat to dry while I pull out some No, I'm sorry. I'm not on the sequins yet. I'm working on the sentiment, which again is a mess. So first, I think I want to stamp it in the rusty hinge. I decide on my sentiment, which is my sister, my friend, and then I stamp it in a rusty hinge. No, that didn't work. So I stamped it again in VersaFine. Looked great. I can't cut a straight line, y'all. I can't do it. I don't know what my problem is. So it took me 3 iterations of this sentiment, and finally I got what I think I like. At least it's not so noticeably crooked. So the final one that I put on, I take my scissors and I cut a little dovetail, and then I use some Derice foam strips that I bought from Stampin' Up, and I use those on the back of the sentiment strip, and I use a little bit of the Gina K Connect glue. That's the same thing that I put on the back of the image and the gosh, what's it called? The fun foam. So I glue it down because I'm thinking, this struggle bus is real, and I don't want this to get stuck down and it be wonky too. So that's how I glue that down. And then I move on to some sequins. So these sequins are beautiful. It took me a while to decide on the ones I wanted to use. Some of these are sparkle blends from Doodle's Playground, and some of them I obtained from the swap that I did with Miss Diane a couple months ago. Was that months ago or was that weeks ago? I don't even know. Anyway, I got them from Miss Diane, and I'm not sure who the manufacturer is, but they're beautiful. They're shades of copper, shades of gold, shades of brass, and different yellows and oranges, and they're just gorgeous. So I don't know if you guys have seen Laura Basson, how she'll sometimes snip a large sequin apart because she likes to tuck it. I like to tuck as well. So I decided to do that, and I kind of tuck it up under that banner, and I put some here and I put some there, and I never know the right quantity. So y'all tell me, did I get it right? Did I have too much? Do I not have enough? And, here it is. It's the final product. I'm not even sure how I feel about it. I'm just done, and I'm glad to be done because I'm over it. Y'all tell me what you think. Can you see the frustration in my hands? Oh my gosh, I just kind of toss it down. So here are some final still shots. I think I redeemed it. So it was a good card gone bad. Did it go back to being good or not? I don't know. Y'all tell me. Again, I'm Nancy. I'm the Handy Scandy, and these are my Crafty Ventures, and I invite you back for another venture, and we'll see where that bus takes us next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.